about mangrove forest, but basically we will focus on climate change. This is very, very important country like Bangladesh, India, Maldives. And we do focus right now in South Asia. So we have our world famous speakers. I want to say he is a polymath. He has a lot of knowledge in different topics. So he can guide us and we will use these things for our research, especially World Talent Economy Forums. We are starting our research on mangrove forest, and we are working on climate change. So hopefully our today's sessions will be valuable for our youth community, for researcher, and for the policymakers of Bangladesh and the global community. Professor David Speed, what you want to add for today's session?
Well, Sharif, thank you very much. You always come up with great, interesting topics, and this one, while a little obtuse, is very interesting because if you look what mangrove forests are, is they're very unique ecosystems, and they're ecosystems that are found along uh, tropical coastlines with really very blackish or high saline waters. And the term mangrove actually refers to a certain shrub or tree that grows in these, but they grow in very thick thickets along the marshes and the tile areas and the muddy coastlines. And they actually occur worldwide. And it's estimated that there's about 110 species considered to be mangrove uh, in the sense that they grow in these areas, but only a few are truly mangrove trees. The geographical spread is very interesting because it really is confined to an area between 25 degrees north and 25 degrees south going across the equator. And like I said, it is considered that mangroves are in 118 countries globally. And that's a very interesting one, but they're typically ones with tropical and subtropical regions. And in for Sharif, your part of the world, about 75% of the global mangroves are found in 15 countries in Asia. Uh, and then Africa, North America, Central America, and the Caribbean, and really looking at their and how they're going. I can tell you when I've been into the mangrove forest uh, down in Florida and in part of the Caribbean, they are quite unique and heavy. And what's neat about them is they have managed to survive in very salty, very saline swamps, and they've been unkind. Were able to overcome the challenges of very high salt and tidal floods that are present there. And what they've done is that they have uh, really created a rich animal ecosystem around them. But what's impacting them right now is the rising temperature and the sea levels due to climate change. They're beginning to grow more and more in other places. And in some parts of the world, they're being considered as very invasive species, and how they would interact with the local uh, ecosystem. They really are two types that really look at how they're doing, but they have a huge role, as you mentioned earlier in your opening, of whole environmental ecosystem. Uh, some of these are big, some of them are sprawl, but they have these huge root systems that work, and they have really adopted well to surviving in these oxygen poor conditions and these changes. They are very good with different things. For example, the mangroves themselves have salt decretion built into them. Their roots really are very pervasive, and they actually will reach out and um, grow in very poor systems. And that they are allowed to absorb from things in from the water, from the silt, from the air. And they do this as an ecosystem view, which is we look at environmental actions and the things that need it. The roots, also the mangrove, uh, are aerial in that they will both emit and absorb, which is really more unique among some of the root systems in agriculture. Uh, the importance, though, of them is very broadly defined, and ones that, as we look at sustainability and climate change, are things which we need to begin to look at on a broader scale. You know, besides supporting the animal and the plant ecosystem around them, they really have a great importance to helping support the environmental integrity of the coastal ecosystems. So in one way, they're a coastal defense. And what do I mean by that? Typically, mangrove forests serve as the first line of defense for coastal communities. So, like for example, when hurricanes come through Florida where they are, they provide a barrier and they stabilize the shoreline by preventing erosion and uh, and really serve as a defense against storm surges, hurricanes, and floodings. Uh, they provide a natural protection from raising seawaters brought on by global warming. Uh, and this is we're beginning to see in places all around. The for communities that live within around 300 feet of sea level and or near the coast, they do provide that natural barrier of protection for coastal defense. They're also a huge part of the coastal food web in that they're feeding grounds that support the food web for thousands of species. Some species, for example, of crabs and insects, feed on the leaves, and while others wait for them to fall from the tree and consume the dying matter, decaying matter from the leaves. And they're very high in nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and sulfur, and others. And they're part of the system of returning very important nutrients back into the soil there and into the coastal ecosystem. Uh, they're also very good about modifying the local physical environment. The value is that they really the very complex root system absorb the impacts of waves and allow them to build up sand and soot and like I said, prevents erosion, but it also helps you see the benefits to maintain clean and healthy water with the way the roots typically go back and forth. And they're really good in the days of our importance of climate change with absorbing and storing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If you look at some of the natural views of what can do that, the trees take up the carbon and they use it as building blocks for their leaves, their branches, and roots. And then once the old leaves fall to the seafloor, once the roots begin to decay enough, they take them with them the stored carbon that they have collected from the global warming and others, and the stored carbon is buried in the soil. And in the environmental drain area, this carbon is referred to as blue carbon since it's stored underwater. And it's estimated that an acre of mangrove forest can store up to 163 grams of carbon per square meter per year. That really is helping to reduce the carbon effect that is accelerating uh, global warming. So these mangrove groves are a very effective carbon collection piece and a carbon sink. And what does that mean is it takes the carbon and it holds it and does not release it back into the atmosphere. Now, there's challenges with mangroves, particularly in this role, in that many places along the coast are destroying mangroves because they're really hard to do human development around. Um, there's an estimation that in the last several years, close to 35% of the total mangrove forest cover has been deforested as they've put more farms in place, more human-based things, and resorts and businesses. And this is really dramatically changing the mangrove environment situation around the world. They're so good at being able to remove carbon, clean the water, and other things that it's it's a challenge there. Southeast Asia remains an area of really key concern when it comes to destroying mangrove forests because of the role they play there in not only the ecosystem, but like I said, in the environmental area right now. And for example, mangrove forests in the uh, Southeast Asia have been cleared to pave the way for shrimp farming, where closed pond systems are used for shrimp agricultural farming. And they really destroy a whole lot of the mangroves. And they use antibiotics and disinfectants to suppress diseases that occur within these systems, and they're often spread into the far and to the surrounding environment, which is harmful to the rest of the ecosystem around where these shrimp farms are put in place. Uh, and we're beginning to see it. And in the areas where those have been destroyed, we're seeing that those areas are much more subjective to tides, to storm surges, and others. And what probably needs to happen there is kind of an integrated mangrove shrimp agriculture happening as opposed to just the widespread destruction of them. There's also raising global temperatures have also just contributed to some of the destruction of mangrove forests due to the rise in sea levels. Even though the mangroves in those conditions can move further inland, human development are a barrier to the spread of mangrove forest inland. And we're seeing that because as they're deforested, we're seeing more and more soil erosion that's happening in those, and particularly in the marsh areas in Asia and in China, where we're seeing widespread destruction of them. Even though there are conservation efforts underway in most part of the world. Um, One of the areas I'm familiar with is with some of the work I've done in the country in the past is Thailand, is they've actually put in a nationwide community management system to look at how do they restore the damaged mangrove forest and how do they bring other areas into it. For example, in Thailand, what they've done is they've begun to introduce more and more uh, bees into the mangrove areas to produce honey, and that using the nutriments and things in the mangrove forest or the covers. In this way, they're producing disposable income from people who are helping maintain the uh, mangrove forest. Uh, you're seeing same thing in other countries. In the Caribbean, constructions are underway around some of the ports to use them as a way to maintain the ports instead of using stone and concrete like they have been going the last several years. Um, and we're seeing that happen all over the world, and how that can work. Um, so just kind of looking at a couple of the points on this one, trying to go uh, put a bow around it some. Mangroves come in a variety of sizes. Uh, like I said, there's hundreds of species, and they can go from small shrubs to trees that stand 40, 50 feet above the water. But all of these species thrive in low oxygen, very high salt coastal environments, ones that are hostile to many, many plants. And like I said, these add to the ecosystem and also help protect the coastlines. Uh, Unlike most trees, mangroves can grow directly in salt or brackish water. And that as you see how they survive in there, some absorb the salt, some secrete it, some filter it out, but they have a very effective means of doing that. And as we talked about earlier, they also in that process capture carbon, and this blue carbon, and they encapsulate it into the ocean floor. Fish love the underwater habitat that mango roots provide. And they're also not just for food, but for many species, the dense environment of the roots provide protection for many small babies, juveniles in the marine species. And they can run from many things to even crocodiles, which the youth tend to hide in there while their parents are out foraging for food. Mangroves live on the edge of these lands. And again, they help them protect the coast. And they do it in mostly tropical, I say 116 tropical and subtropical uh, uh, countries. And the largest amount, again, of mangrove coverage is found in Indonesia, uh, where it's estimated that today they've shrunk to about 31,000 square kilometers of coverage, which is a good environmental chunk in there, and we see the impacts of that. But the big thing is we look at mangrove forest and we begin to look at it as it has a place in climate change is the fact that it's a perfect place with multiple functions. Like I said before, these functions range from uh, protecting the coastline, building up an ecosystem of nutriments, providing areas for fish and others to live, and really balancing out the ecosystems around them. And this balancing of the ecosystems today is very important in those communities. And we can learn a lot from looking at the mangrove forest and the role of carbon capture. It's important for us to reduce the rate of carbon emission. The goal is 1.4 per year, but it looks like we're going to be closer to 2.2, 2.5 over the next couple of years for carbon release. And mangoes and the growth of mangoes forest can serve as an important part of that. So, Sharif, I think this is an introduction to get us going. And Sharif, you look frozen. So, Tonga, I noticed you have joined us. Do you want to add some comments at this time?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Togono
Yes,
Seven from Mali. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. I'm Togono Seven from Mali. So, the founder of a youth-led organization, Awamgo Education and Empowerment. So, we teach young people
Can
more
you open
about
your camera,
environmental
please?
protection. Okay, yeah, I'm just
Can you open your
joining my
camera,
call. That's
please?
why. Yes, I'm here. Okay, just it's okay now. Yeah, okay. Uh, Great. So we teach young people how to protect the environment. Here in Mali, we
Yes.
don't have a
So what you
mangrove,
want to share
but I need
about mangrove forest?
Okay, thank you so much. Here in Mali, we don't have mangrove, but we partner with Kenyan activists to know how we can work together and solve this problem. So during our activities, we inform local communities to help them understand the importance of mangroves for capturing carbon, so carbon emission. So young people now, they are more engaged in the community in Kenya to protect the mangrove in the local places. So we work with Kenyan because here in Mali we don't have a mangrove, but we work with them to teach young people about the importance, of mangrove and how to protect them. Yeah, thank you so much.
I know that is very uh, good to teach the youth that. That's part of what we need to do globally. Uh,
Thank you. Professor David Smith, can you hear me?
I can. Yes,
Professor David, can you hear me?
I can. Can you not hear me? Let me try again. Can you not hear me? Do I need to reconnect? Let me check here. Sharif, can you not hear me? It shows I'm broadcasting. Let me hop out and come back
Mr.
in.
Togo, can you hear Mr. David Smith?
Yes, I can. I can hear you both of you. I can hear you both of you. I can hear you. Yes, Mr. David and you. I can hear you, both of you.
Okay. Professor David, can you continue, please?
Sure. Mr. Tago really emphasize what he's doing with the youth community and with teaching them the importance of mangroves to the ecosystem and particularly to climate change. This type of education, this type of learning needs to be extended to other parts of the world. There's just not an abundance of education today on the important role that they play in not only protecting the ecosystems and preserving the coastlines and other things like that, but their impact in protecting climate change. And the it's very interesting that the National Geographic Society has now done special issues on what are the importance of the mangrove ecosystem and how they are extremely very, very high in biodiversity and how that biodiversity is going to play a very important role in the future of not just the coastlines, but in the climate change as well, and how that and the biochemistry of the mangoes really helps with the carbon cycles, because mangrove forests are among some of the world's most productive marine ecosystems, and they achieve a steady state going pretty much forward. But for them to get to the steady state from trying to replant new mangrove forests and things, it takes about 20 years through a constant process of renewal and mortality. Uh, and that, when you look at their ability to capture, particulate, and dissolve organic compounds and inorganic compounds, it's very important part of the life system. And there's a lot of discussion globally that their role in the ecosystem needs to be better understood, because it's not just the carbon cycle, it's also the nitrogen as well. And they are considered uh, to be very highly efficient at utilizing soil nitrogen, again, making them a very important sink for excess nitrogen from upstream in the countries where they are grown. And they're so two of their biggest things, environmental impact, is both on the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle as it's going forward. Also, we're beginning to see them used in places where uh, they're also a very common source of helping with what's called ocean deoxification, where the mangrove trees, like the seagrass and others, transport oxygen to the roots in there, and then that is dissolved oxygen is put more back into the oceans to use and help with the problems. And they're also a source of helping clean up water pollution with the way they have set up the ecosystem around them. And so they have, like I said earlier, a very, very important role as you look at the entire ecosystem and from an environmental standpoint, from carbon and the others. And it's when it's not well understood. To just come up to speed on mangroves and understand their importance. I agree with Mr. Togo that this should be a lot more widespread, and a lot of the elements that need to be improved there. And so, Dr. Sharif, do you have other questions for me on this?
Uh, Actually, if you discuss more about uh, the impact of mangrove forest, uh, because country like Bangladesh, we actually losing many of our forests, especially mangrove. Uh, how we can create awareness, how it can create an impact to solve climate change.
Well, I would love to hear what's the education program that Pongo used in Africa as part of the education there. But I think the you've heard me talk in the past that we're in a time of lifelong learning, and I believe that this type of education would be important. I know, for example, here in Texas, we only have a couple of small mangrove groves down on our coastline. But as I go east into Florida and that area, they're quite more extensive. And when I've been in Asia, particularly in Thailand, I've seen mangrove forests all over the places. But I've also seen the fact that because they're not understood, because they're complex, and when they grow on the coastline, you really cannot get to the coastline easy as humans. There is a natural tendency to destroy them so that you can turn it more into commerce, you can turn it more into recreation and other activities like that. We have to put in education processes to really help not just the citizen, but business leaders and the government understand the important role of these mangrove groves, these mangrove forests, into not only the economic life cycle, but also protecting the coastline, protecting the fish, protecting, taking the carbon and the nitrogen out and dealing with those. So to go back to that crazy movie we sometimes talk about, The Lion King, there is a circle of life, and the mangrove forest uh, maintain a very important part of that circle of life, and particularly with climate change. And we need to do what we can to educate the people on their role of it in that whole ecosystem.
Mhm.
I
Yes,
would
thank
love to
you.
hear. I'd love to hear how he has put the education programs in place, though.
Mr. Togo, anything you want to share? Your education program?
Okay. So thank you so much. So for our education program, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So for our education program, so we partner with schools. That's very important. Local schools where the mangroves where they live close to the mangrove stream. So we partner with those schools and teach young people age basic age, young people, not to the adults, but the children, like I can say, children from elementary schools. We teach them how to protect the mangroves because in order to change the behavior against harmful issues like this, so we try to first sensitize because we start with sensitizing the communities, then partner with schools so that they can learn more about the importance. Because whenever they know the importance, it will be easier for them to protect. And we help them to, like children who don't have or who didn't have opportunity to visit the mangrove, we bring them to the place so that they can see how they interact with other species in the nature. So that way, we try to raise awareness about not about the technical components, but the way they interact with other species in the nature. This is what we are trying to do, and we try to learn from other experts because we are not experts. We just trying to make people understand the importance, and we partner with experts so that they can give us more details about technical details. I mean, technical details, so that we can share their information in the local area. Yeah.
Professor David Smith, yeah, you have any proposal for courses and
Well,
syllabus?
I do, Dr. Sharif. Let's just look in your part of the world right now. In Southeast Asia, it's home to about a third of all coastal mangrove forests on Earth. And some of the estimates are that almost 600 million people depend directly or indirectly on the ecosystem provided by these mangrove forests, the resources and for income, for food and others. Uh, it's also important to remember they provide a very efficient natural protection system from storm surges, tsunamis, hurricanes, and others for these coastal uh, communities. However, this whole area in Southeast Asia is suffering some of the highest rates of mangrove loss of anywhere in the world. And it's there was a study done by the CGRF not long ago uh, out of UK looking at Southwest Asia on these. And it was to look at what are the hazards for these and how do you drive solutions to improve the livelihoods for the local communities while maintaining the very important role of it. And one of the early findings on this is that by surveying people in these coastal communities, there was a total lack of understanding of the multiple roles that mangrove ecosystems can serve and how this is linked not only to the global areas of climate change, particularly carbon and nitrogen, not only to how it supports the fishing ecosystem, how it supports the nutriments of that whole area, but they also looked at how it's linked to the social, psychological health of youth of the local communities. And what they found is there is not a ongoing flow of information, of training, of education to understand the importance of preserving the ecosystem and the services around that, the mangrove forest that the local communities rely on. And the study was to begin to look at how do you put a framework in place and how do you do that. Once again, this study was financed and led by the Global Challenges Research Fund, and really was one looking explicitly at these areas in Southeast Asia and what needs to be done, and and understanding their impacts, like I said, not only in the local ecosystem, which are very big and strong there, but also in climate change. Uh, and mangroves are affect climate change in, like I said, very unique ways, in very complex ways, where the ability to and then to turn it into blue carbon by putting it under the mud and things in those areas to where it does not uh, get into the air system and further uh, impact that. Uh, Another global change factor that people need to understand is the increased carbon dioxide in the air that they begin to increase the ability of capturing that to increase the photosynthesis of that mangoes. And this increased photosynthesis actually improves the water quality and the ecosystem for the surrounding fish, crops, and others in it. So it's a complex area, Dr. Sharif. You know, I would put this into some of the same systems, the systems type work that we talk about often on your program, and that the mangoes play such an important role in so many parts of the ecosystem that it is worthwhile to put in a framework in place to train it. But it's one that has to be, I mean, like Mr. Tago is focusing in the elementary schools. It also needs to be extended to the regulatory bodies, into government, into universities, and into the commercial sector too. I can see other places where we often talked about, Dr. Shree. I can see some very interesting entrepreneur areas where this can be taken into account, and how I can see companies being formed to be able to not only help protect the mangroves, but begin to use the byproducts of their processes to improve and produce income for the coastal communities that are allowing the growth of mangroves to preserve and advance. So I hope that answered your question.
We love to learn more about Mali, about your country, about the climate change issues. Mr. Togo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, we want to know more about your country, about the climate change issues, about mangrove forest.
Okay. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. First of all, Mali is a landlocked country. So I also precise that we don't have mangrove here in Mali, but we have mangrove. We work with people in Kenya. Yes, we work with them about to implement our environmental mitigation program. Here, here in Mali, the climate change issue is real. Why I say? Because now, as a landlocked country, the rain is not coming. That's why many young people are leaving their villages because they cannot farm. This is the first reason, and the second one is that some places are polluted, like rivers. We have two main rivers here in Mali, and those two main rivers are polluted first by plastic waste, then even the near industries that produce in the place, they pollute there's two main rivers. And so here, what you are trying to do is that to inform first the government that the places are polluted and how we can work together in order to solve the problem. But unfortunately, so the environmental issue here in Mali is not a priority for the government, but we also always write to the government to inform them about the issues and propose them the solution. This is always what we are trying to do as educator. So we in the communities partner with the young people and the schools in order to inform them. So why we do this? Because if our voice is not heard by the government, if young people they join us and work together, the government will see our the impact of our work. That's the way we are trying to engage young people and make our voice heard.
Okay, thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks and what type of advice you want to give for the developing nations, specifically for protecting mangrove forest?
Chief, thank you for allowing me to be part of this. It has been educational and informative for me as well. My concluding remarks really are structured around the concept that you see so much of the benefits to the ecosystem, they're limited to the band across the equator in the tropical, semi-tropical area, but they play a significant role in not only in the local communities, but really as we look at the global climate change issues as well. Um, for the developing nations, my message is pretty simple: is understand the importance of them. And look at what you can do to enhance the ability for the communities, the country, to be able to not only protect what's there, but actually reforest part of them to increase their capabilities. But doing the same with understanding that it can help grow local economy as we see new and newer ways of doing it, and even look at ways that they can be used in other regions to support the global climate change initiatives. Uh, but I think it's key, what I see is key to enhance the education system, to let people understand more their role, more their importance, and more the impact that they can have on other things within the community. So, Sharif, that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Togo, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Okay, thank you so much. My conclusion is always talking about always trying to be more focused on education because I think that nowadays, in order to solve environmental issues, education is more important. So, as Dr. David said, so not only working with elementary schools or young people, we need to work with industrials so that we can have more impact. So this is the lesson learned from us because we only focus more on elementary schools. Now we try to let industrials, so businessmen, so that we can work together and find solutions. So sharing information is also important because as young people, we need more information from experts to learn more about the issues and share their information with local people so that we can have more impact in the future. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Mangrove forest is a very important things for Bangladesh and India, and it's play a major role to solve this climate change issue. So we need to protect it. World Talent Economy Forum doing research on that particular issues, particular topics. From our speaker, from our audience, those who want to collaborate with us, we are open for collaboration. We want to do research, and we want to apply the solutions what we get from our research. Professor David Smith and Mr. Togo, thank you for your support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporations, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye, and take care.
Thank you.